We have a guest with us, someone who we were introduced to, at least online, last year when we found the sharing wealth movement in New Zealand. I believe it's high net worth individuals in New Zealand saying that we should pay more tax. Who do we talk to about that? Did we talk to Philip Mills about that? I think we might have talked to Philip Mills about that and some other people. Someone else on the list whose name we saw at the time was the co-founder of the ecostore, Malcolm Rands. Malcolm joins us right now. Kia ora, sir. Welcome to the show.
Kia ora. Lovely to be here, boys.
Good to have you here.
Can we just, we're here to talk about, billionaires, the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer, and happy to talk about tax as well. But could we just do a little bit of a 5-minute history into you, first of all, for the whānau watching? You are a co-founder with your wife of ecostore. How did that all come about?
Correct. Well, you can get the book. So I'll have to do a very quick summary of it. But basically, I had, in my not-for-profit work, I had a bit of a horrible thing happen to me. My best ever venture was stripped away from me, and I thought this is never going to happen again. So I spent a whole year going deep and dark and thinking, what do I know? And most importantly, what stops me? And I came up with a mind map for a ethical business whose ecostore, whose purpose in the end is to fund a foundation, the Fairground Foundation. So in '93, I started that, and off I went.
So basically, you made a way that you could generate income to support other work you were doing, as opposed to just supporting yourself and keeping it all in the bank, so to speak.
Yes. And in fact, I never particularly wanted to be that rich myself, because it's actually a very dangerous thing to be rich. The old power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. You see it. I've seen it among people I know, and it's sad. So I'd rather just be sort of comfortable, but not super rich. But having said that, I am comfortable, and I'm more comfortable than most people in New Zealand, I'm sure. I'm not sort of underplaying that. And I'm very happy that I would like to pay more tax. I don't think I'm paying enough tax.
Shall we start there, Chewie? Because as I just said in the introduction, actually, our first introduction to you was using ecostore products, but unwittingly to you.
Thank you.
And then the actual first introduction to your name came out when we did some bits and pieces on the open letter on tax, which, long story short, pardon me, is to the government saying, those of us with a few extra pingers, we could pay a bit more. Is that a fair synopsis of what it was?
It's funny, it was so well received, like I thought, some of my rich mates are going to have a crack at me, but they didn't, they didn't. In fact, there's a lot of consensus out there that we do need to pay more tax. And it's not just for social programs, but for example, climate change is coming. And it's going to take all sorts of infrastructure, and there's so much we need to do. Where's that money come from? Where's it come from? And who's got money? And it's not the middle class. It's certainly not the working families. They haven't got any money. The only people who've got a bit of spare dosh are the well-to-do. So I think we should be putting a bit more in the pot so that New Zealand can be a better place for us all to live.
Cool. Hey, let's set a framework if we can. What do you think you need, a human being needs, to be considered rich? Like, if we talk about the rich listers, obviously that's the top of the echelon. At what point do you think you become a normie? Is there like an idea? Is it less tangible, like, well, I can afford to pay my bills? Or is there a mark that when you're thinking about paying more tax, you hit?
Well, I think if you don't spend a lot of time thinking, can I pay my bills? I did that for a long time. I started ecostore with no money. We were very poor when we started it. We were, believe it or not, we were living a family of 4 on $20,000 a year. If we went on the dole, we had an improvement. So we weren't rich, but we were doing something called voluntary simplicity. You find out these names after you've done it, and that means we swapped money for time. And so therefore, when our kids between the age of 0 and 10, they had 1.5 parents at home all the time, because just Melanie or I could work 20 hours a week and we could support our family. I mean, we did have a garden. We did have one of the most beautiful beaches in the world at the bottom of our road, which is such a great babysitter. So, I mean, we had it pretty sweet, you know, and we had no mortgage, because I'd been lucky enough to get in early on the Auckland housing market. And when we sold that, I could come into the eco village and build a house without a mortgage. So we were pretty sweet in that way, but we had no capital. So out of the blue, and he didn't know what I was doing, my brother rang me up one day and he said, I don't know if you've ever needed any money to start, Malcolm, but I'm flush at the moment. And he didn't even know that I was working on this business plan. It just came completely out of the blue. And so we started ecostore with $20,000, believe it or not.
Wow, that's a pretty nice. That's a nice phone call to have, isn't it? Hey, would you like some cash? I've got some. That's a good. I hope my siblings are listening. Chewie, got any questions around the origin story?
I know, and it's never happened before or after. But he's a lovely, generous guy, my brother. So, and I owe a lot to him. So he's a great guy.
I actually didn't know any of that story. I came into this interview blind, but I can tell you that my kitchen and laundry are full of ecostore products. Yeah. So good job.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. And I mean, when I started in '93, believe it or not, it was still Gordon Gecko. Greed is good. You had to be a bit of an asshole to be successful in business. There was everything around me, and here I was trying to sell plant-based dishwashing liquid to the masses by mail order. Crazy boy, but we got there in the end.
We were talking about what a horrible environment the 90s were. Just generally, we had looking at an interview Ruth Richardson did last night. So I think that all ties together, that business was hard and the government was hard, and I guess the people of New Zealand society were caught in a thresher at that stage. So it's nice to hear that someone had an idea to go in a different direction.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, everyone thought I was completely crazy because there was no eco products at all in the supermarkets at that stage. Nothing. So, and that made the difference, was getting into the supermarkets, and then getting into the supermarkets in Australia. That's what really made us just rock and roll. And after that, look out world. So now we're actually in Japan, China, all over the place.
Wow. It's interesting to think of a time where there was zero focus on eco anything within our supermarkets. That sounds like a completely literal different time.
It does, doesn't it? I know. Yeah. It was.
Hey, before we go on to the rich list, etc., can we just go full circle on what you're doing? Can you explain to us what Fairground is, what you guys do there? So we know that ecostore is sort of an incubator for cash to do other things like Fairground. What do you guys do there? What's it all about?
Well, again, it seems my environment, community seems to be my two main things that I'm focusing on. And that's the mind map I came up with. And if you want to go scroll down again, it's the mind map I came up with in '93. And we're still on target for that. So the two projects we've got at the moment, one is, as you can see on my T-shirt, is Bucket. And that is a new way to make supporting the literally tens and tens of thousands of everyday Kiwis who are out in the New Zealand bush, looking after predators, planting, looking after streams, coastlines, and they don't get any support. I mean, there is support from DOC and big, but that's for big projects. All the small ones, it's a real pain for them, and they shouldn't be really spending their time fundraising. They're the sort of people who, they'll say, oh, let's do some fundraising, and they'll put $1,000 in the pot to publicize it, and they'll work for about $2,000 worth of time and make $500. It's just ridiculous. They shouldn't be doing that. So we've got this new app coming out where suddenly you can find these people. You'll see the people. You'll see the projects they're doing. You can choose what you like, whether it's kiwis or penguins or your backyard, and you go right in, you'll meet the people, and they'll put up projects we're going to do, and you'll see a project. Oh, I like that project. So you know exactly what you're supporting. Yes, I want to support that project. And at the same time, it's also, yeah.
I was going to say, so is it kind of like a pseudo social media where people will connect on it to do these tasks, or is it like a fundraiser where people will connect virtually, go, I like what you're doing, here's $20, or is it both?
Exactly. The groups are out there already, but people don't know about them. So we're making it easy to become almost a part of their group, because you'll see the people, you'll see their project. But the main thing is if you give to a lot of not-for-profits, you don't know a clue where the money's going to go. The thing with Bucket, you know exactly where your money is going. So you'll get a report back on how effective you were. Okay. So
and the other thing I'm assuming there's going to be like right down into neighborhood type groups, like small community groups that you can literally know exactly where they are and what they're doing. Most of them are small community groups. Yeah, we're not worried about the big projects that much. They get the funding. They're sexy. They actually have a lawyer on their board and blah blah. We're talking about ma and pa here, you know, who don't have any of that. But and writing submissions is just a nightmare, and most of them get turned down. We want to look after these people, and we're also doing it using Giving Circle technology, and we're also working with Kia, who look after the million New Zealanders who don't live in New Zealand, and we're tapping into that because they love New Zealand and they would like to help what's happening, you know, keep the New Zealand beautiful. They would love to, but they don't know how to do it. So we're going to be tapping into them as well. So that's one project. The other project I'm doing is working on my big thing, which is about community. So I've been living in an eco village now for 40 years. So I know what I'm doing here. And I want to bring the technology of good neighborhoods into the city. And the project is called Bump Space. It's all about new builds. Suburbs are hopeless. Walk away from a suburb. Don't live in a suburb. Work into you want to live in a medium density, three-story walk-up is my favorite. Like Italy is all three-story walk-ups. And what happens if you live there, the design is so clever that when you're moving around your property, going to your car, going out shopping, going to use the facilities, just accidentally you keep on bumping into your neighbors. It's designed so that you bump into your neighbors. The opposite of the suburbs, where you can sort of never meet your neighbors. And the more you bump into the same people, suddenly, I recognize you. Oh, you find out their name. Before you know it, you're looking after their budgie while they go on holiday. And before you know it, you're living in a neighborhood where you belong. That's what I'm aiming for, living in a neighborhood where you feel you belong. And if you look at the problems, health problems on the planet, number one killer of people is loneliness, lack of community. Number one killer. It's also the number one reason for addiction, lack of community. So that's what I'm on to looking. And at the moment, I was going to become a property developer. I'm glad I didn't do that. It'd be a nightmare. But I'm working with existing people and helping meld what they're doing more towards bump spacey. The number one person I've worked with in Auckland is a group called Ockham, and they're doing wonderful stuff. I'm just started working with Simplicity, because they're going to be building rentals right through New Zealand, and if they can be neighborhoods, then you won't be worried about vandalizing like a slum, because if you feel you belong there, you're going to look after it. So that's my other project. And for people to find
out,
I've got a couple of little ones. Sorry, we've got a bit of a lag here. Yeah, fairground.org. Do you want to mention a couple? You're welcome to mention a couple other things if you want, Malcolm, before we go on to the talk about billionaires.
No.
A couple other things we want to throw out there?
You'll never shut me up. You better stare me, I think. Otherwise, you'll never shut me up.
All right. Well, that's fairground.org. There's more things up there as well. The About Us, the Bucket, the Bump Space, and a list of past projects and stuff as well that people can find out more about it on. Okay, so let's have a look at this. As somebody who was featured on the Sharing Wealth, one of the signatories to the Sharing Wealth, when you hear stories coming out about the the richest in New Zealand increasing their wealth from 95 billion to 110 billion, while the poorest are dropping like 30%. What does that make you think and feel?
I feel, I mean, I don't want to sound up myself, but I don't think a lot of these people are very happy, to tell the truth. I think a really good article about how come these people who are super wealthy haven't sort of become really, I've got enough and I want to give back, and like Elon Musk, why are they always turning, some of them actually are turning into greedy psychopaths. I have to say that some of them, I'm not talking about people in New Zealand, but around the world. Why are they doing this? And the analysis is kind of like an addiction. They're like addicts. To get their dopamine, they have to do more and more outrageous things. They can't sit still, and it's actually, they don't, and horribly to bloody get their next dopamine hit, they're going to bloody destroy the whole planet just to keep themselves entertained. It's sort of that. It's not rational anymore. It is not good for anyone to be that rich. It's not good for their own, because what I've found of really rich people is everyone around them turns into sort of like, they lose it. They just want to suck up to them, I have to say. And everyone around them is telling them they're wonderful and they're like a god, everyone. And they start believing it. I've seen that a few times. I mean, having said that, there's some really beautiful rich people out there. I'm not generalizing about everyone, but as a trend, it's sort of quite dangerous to get super rich, I think, and keep your sanity and keep your hands on the ground.
Yeah, but Bill Gates is the exception, not the rule, is he? Elon Musk is the rule and what he wants to do. And if we think about what we said earlier, if someone has $20 billion, what the Mowbray brothers have got, and obviously it's not $20 billion in cash, but if they liquefied everything and they had $20 billion in the bank, $1 million a day would last them over 54 years. And when you start thinking about that kind of money, and you just go, and Chewie said this last time. Sorry to steal your question, Chewie. If you had someone in front of you, you'd go, "When is enough enough? When have you got enough? Like when is it enough?
Never.
Yeah,
that's what we've been shown again and again. It's never enough because it's an addiction. They cannot get enough, and I've seen it. I've actually, I've had partners who are billionaires in the States, and he had so much money, but he kept on, how can I get more? How can I get more? It's just, as I said, if you look at it through the lens of addiction, that's a new one for me. It kind of makes sense. They're not at rest. Really, they're not peaceful, and they can't trust anyone. Like this guy, my old partner in the States, he rings me up quite a lot because he actually found me and he pulled me into the States with ecostore, right? So I never sold him anything. He grabbed me, and so I didn't owe him anything. And I used to, like a Kiwi, I used to give him shit all the time, right? He had no one else in his life doing that. No one. And because of that, he's stayed a friend, because he's got no one else everyone else tells him he's like a god.
Yeah.
Everyone else around him.
Yes, man. Yeah. Chewie.
Yeah,
of course.
Thinking of it like an addiction, that's a really interesting thought. And I think when you were just saying there, Pat, they end up surrounding themselves with yes men, or essentially other addicts. There's no one there that pops their bubble and sort of goes, "Come on, mate.
That's right.
Do you really need more? Do you really need to sit on this mountain of hoarded gold?
That fifth helicopter?
Is this making you happy?" Yeah, it's a really interesting thought.
Yeah, we need to be sending them all along to AA, you reckon?
Yeah, maybe something. There's a BA, Bugger All Billionaires Anonymous, something like that. How many
steps? 12 steps? Or?
Yeah, something like that. On Billionaires, this is what the Prime Minister said after the rich list came out. Isn't it fantastic that we've got people with ambition, aspiration and positivity, and we should be celebrating success? I know how hard people work in New Zealand, and there are some pretty inspirational stories. As a country, we want people to be able to move themselves from one set of circumstances to a better set of circumstances, and it's okay to celebrate this success. But I just also say to you, of course he had to say, but I'll say to you, even in print, Chewie, but I'll just also say to you that I know New Zealanders are doing it tough, And it's important that we are doing everything we can as a government to create the conditions for growth. That's what we have been doing, and that's what our budget is doing. Unfortunately, I think they're making areas for growth again for the top, whereas the people at the bottom, the vulnerable, are getting, what's the opposite of growth? Crushed. There you go. That actually works well. Are getting crushed is what I'm seeing, Malcolm.
The funny thing is, in the golden years of Western growth, you know, through the 50s and the 60s into the 70s, people at the top were paying 95% tax.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this was our best ever growth. And they're paying 95%. I mean, I got nothing wrong with good business and making things of value and being successful and good on you, you know, if you know, if you can do things well but I think that money is built on everyone around you, not just you. And I think it needs to be shared. You need to look after your community where you live. Otherwise, you know, in the end, you're going to end up in a walled compound. You know, well, you have to bring the whole country with you.
You also know that the wealthy aren't, money doesn't bring happiness. It may make life easier, but it doesn't bring happiness. And one of the stats that I always pull back from is because suicide rates are basically exactly the same amongst the wealthy as the rest of society. So everyone has the same trials and tribulations and issues and insecurities. And rather than now competing with your neighbor who's also working, you know, in a shop, you're competing with your neighbor who's also got 6 helicopters. It's all the same. I can actually remember moving between radio stations. I used to work for a charity radio station. And I can remember we would complain because management couldn't find $100 for us to do some kind of competition on air. And then I moved and started working for Classic Hits, big, powerful, one of the biggest radio stations. And they were complaining because management wouldn't give them $1,000 to do something on air. It's exactly the same complaints, just different levels of income and different levels of money put at the end of that complaint. But the complaints were exactly the same, Malcolm.
Yeah. And I'd actually dispute that. I mean, at a certain level, I agree, having money makes things easier. Of course it does. You know, if you don't have to worry about paying the bills, that's wonderful. If you can do the things that interest you and support your family and things, wonderful. But when you get to another level, it actually starts getting hard again because you can't trust people. Everyone's after you for something, you know, like, you know, oh, are they really my friend or they want something? You know, even your own family, like people I know, they don't even trust their own bloody wife and kids anymore. It's just awful. So, I mean, I would dispute at a certain point whether it makes your life easier. But it does up to a certain point, 100%. Yeah. You know, you don't want to be poor. No one likes being poor. No one. And we need to support people who haven't got enough to give their kids lunches, their Marmite sandwich and the apple, you know. I think, you know, we really do need to support those people, 100%.
Okay, Malcolm, just to kind of wrap this thing up then, seeing you've just said that, and we both defer to your expertise in the area of having or not having money, what could this government do to enable more people to at least have the point where they don't have to worry as much about money? Like, I'm thinking about your sharing wealth work. What could this government do, or any government, to make life a little bit easier for the people who are struggling the most at the moment?
I mean, I think I hate to be doom and gloom if we're ending now, but I think if you're looking at the very smart people and AI coming in, suddenly half the people are going to lose their jobs, and that's in the next little while. So I think we're going to have to look at something like the universal wage. We do need. And where it's done, it's worked really well, you know. And people then, if they don't have to worry about, you know, if you know, like the trouble being on the dole is then when you start working, you got that horrible situation where it's better to be on the dole because if you're working or you lose all your money, if you just, I mean, the model you want to look at is your retirement money, you know, like you can get that if you're still working. And you don't have to worry about if you're making money, you're going to lose your superannuation. You don't have to worry about it. I think that's the model to look at. And then once people have got enough money to buy their kids lunch, to bloody put a warm, dry roof over their heads, then they can go out and be entrepreneurial, or they can bloody dig their garden, or they can actually care for their folks. There's so many things they could do if they're not trapped in low-paid jobs. And those jobs are going to go anyhow. So we have to look something pretty radical. I think the only thing I can see out there is the universal income. And use it like superannuation. I think we've got to go down that way, and hopefully the very rich in New Zealand will help support that.
Because that's the only way UBI works, right? Because a UBI would mean more money needed in the government coffers, and the way they do that at the moment is through taxes and things like wealth tax or capital gains tax. That's pretty much the only way,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it does. Yeah. The people who've got the money need to support the whole community. They really do. Otherwise, they're not going to be living in a country they want to live in the end.
Chewie, I'm going to throw a couple of questions at Malcolm from the super chats. Is there anything you want to ask her before we wrap up?
Yeah, I've had this question rattling around in my head when we've had other wealthy guests on the show talking about, hey, look, we need to look at paying more tax. We've seen the open letter that went around at that time. There's an election next year. What plan, if any, do you have to make this an issue for the parties that want to lead the country for the next term?
I personally think one of the reasons Labor lost is because they didn't have the courage to go for this, because we'd put it out a year before the election, and we had amazing support. We had amazing support across the community. It was there to be taken, but they just, what I heard is that they thought, well, if we put this out, all the rich people will just dump on us and we'll be toast. And so they didn't put it out, and all the rich people dumped on them and they're toast anyhow. So
that's so true.
So I think the people on the left have to be brave with tax. They do. They have to be brave.
Yeah, and that's it, isn't it? Brave with tax, because we've said this for a long time, Malcolm. And look, I won't say that this is an absolute, because there may be some gaps, but normally you find that those legislative changes, those laws that are in place right now that pretty much all New Zealanders hold on to and go, we aren't letting these go, whether it's free education, whether it's the state housing, whether it's free healthcare, whether it's working for families, whether it's interest-free student loans. They're all policies from the left when they've chosen to be brave. There is very little out there that you can think of as an inspirational, massive legislative thing that we all want to hold on to that's come from the other side. So the left needs to be brave to drive this country into a new place. I completely agree with you.
Yep.
There's two quick questions here, if you've got a second. The first one, they're actually both from the same person, from Kiwi Bird. Kiwi says, thoughts on worker co-ops. I thought that might be right up your street, Malcolm. Worker co-ops?
They are tricky, the trouble is humans are humans, and they kind of like to argue, and in our village we've actually gone 40 years as a cooperative, and believe it or not, we've never gone out of complete consensus for all our decisions, but very slow. I wouldn't do it in business. So it depends. If you're like in an entrepreneurial business, I wouldn't go for down the co-op. I'd actually, but if you're in like a service industry, or, there's lots of places where we can done it. And I think Montreal and the Basque Company of Spain is an incredible example of, it's been going for about 40 years. A lot of their successful business is cooperative, so it can be done, and there are lessons to be learned out there. But it's not easy. It's tricky. It is tricky.
And the last question before we say goodnight, from Kiwi Bird again, actually. And we've talked a bit about billionaires, but do you have any specific thoughts on Elon Musk?
He's an addict. He is. That's what I'm saying. He in drugs as well. Drugs. He's a sex addict. He's a drug addict. He's an excitement addict. He's just out of control. I'm sorry. And it's a shame, because when he first came along with Tesla, I thought, yay, you smart guy. You've made electric cars sexy. That's just what we needed. Good on you. But then when I heard that he wasn't afraid of doing a coup in Bolivia because he wanted the precious metals, I said, oops. And that was about 4 years ago he said that. I thought, no, not my boy anymore. So he lost it for me about 4 years ago.
Hey, Malcolm, thanks so much for giving us some time tonight. We'll let you get back to your family. It feels to me a little bit like you are someone who has a lot to say in this area, so we might have to stay in touch and get you on again sometime soon.
Sure, I'd love to. It's good chatting to you guys. I think probably our problem is we're probably agreeing too much. Next time I want you to get some really snaky, nasty questions for me. I like those ones. Put me on the spot more. You've been too nice
department.
to me.
Yeah, Chewie's the snaky one.
We will definitely have you back.
What we do is we're just winding you in with a nice conversation.
I love that. Yeah.
Well, we just wind you in with a nice, gentle, loving conversation. Then next time we'll smash you. Deal?
Yeah. Okay.
All right, Malcolm.
Yeah.